Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Jimmy Ed Abernathy, Charles Leroy Adkins, Kenneth John Ainsworth, Rodney Arthur Alfano, Donald William Allen Jr., Robert Leroy Anders, Von Stephen Anderson, Willie James Angus, Joseph Charles Applegate, Barry Lee Armstrong, Moses Anthony Arnold, Michael Paul Austin, Jesse Thomas Bailey Jr., Robert Volney Bear, Ray Carroll Banks, Donald Eugene Bartek, Charles James Bauer Jr., John Joseph Bentfeld, Alan Wayne Berry, Albert Leon Betts, Quentin Wayne Binder, Craig Slade Blackner, Kenneth Borowitz, Larry Eugene Boyer, Ricky Curtis Bradley, Guy Franklin Brooks, Irvin Brown, Terry Adam Bryson, James Albert Bunn, Donald Dawson Burnham, Arthur Allen Callister, John Irwin Cameron, John Henry Cannon, Robert L. Chapman, Philip Ronald Chassian, Peter Frederick Cherney, Alan Donahue Cheshire, Larry Monroe Clark, Milo Bruce Coghill, Paul Raymond Collett Jr., Darrell Wayne Cowan, David Wayne Crary, Rel Krieger Jr., Richard Lee Cullen, John Paul Culp, John Anthony DeBonca, Andrew James Daniel, Leroy Buddy Daniels, John Myron Dashnaw, Albert Ashley Davenport, Jerry Reed Davis, Dennis Patrick Day, William Herman Denny Jr., Charles Edward Diamond, Delford Benjamin Dunifer, John Robert Dusbabic, Ted Willis Edwards, Sidney John Elye, Richard Eugene Engel, John Douglas Evans, David Asel Fairchild, James Terrence Feeney, Raymond Jean Feld, Cristobal Figueroa Perez,
William Edward Finley, Gary Ray Fitch, Russell Ray Flesher, Robert Paul Foley, William Ellen Folan, John Dennis Freppen, Joe Raymond Fulgham Jr., Gary Lee Gable, Reynold Ludger Gagne, James Gaines Jr., Leandro Garcia, Clifford McCarthy Gardell, Gerald Lee Gardner, James Lee Gardner, Charles J. Gibilterra Jr., Silas Eugene Gibson, Horace Gilbert Giddens Jr., Richard Edwin Gideon, Jan Royce Gillum, Kenneth Edward Golden, Joel Humby Gonzalez Velez, James Edward Goslin, George Joseph Gottwald, Jr., Lawrence Frederick Greer, Wayne Douglas Grote, Thomas Roy Grover, Fergus Coleman Groves II, Philip Guillen, John David Guillen, Hollis Ray Hale, Gilbert Lee Hamilton, Alan Carson Hardison, Lincoln Hardy, David Franklin Heiser, Peter Herma Heisenbuttel, René Zaragoza Hernandez, Roger Daniel Herrando, Guy Richard Hively, Douglas Edward Hoback, Douglas Elmer Hoffman, Homer Warren Hollister, Leon Ferdinand Huber, Samuel Green Hurry, Charles Edward Inlow, George Emmett Jackson, Fred Walter Jansonius, Randall Lee Jenkins, Philip Harry Johnson, Willard Vernon Johnson, John Lee Jones, David Leroy Judy, Ralph Ainsworth Keating, Robert George Keats, Carl Randolph Keck, Kendrick King Kelly III, Roger Edward Kelly, James Kent Kirby, Douglas Lee Koenig, Raymond Eugene Kramer, John Frederick Kuyper, Gary Joseph Landon, Vincent P. Landon, Robert Darrell Larson, Patrick James Lavelle,
Fred Joseph LeBlanc, Eloy Felipe Este LeBlanc, Eric Oakley Lewis, Nicholas Anthony Leah, William Earl Lozier, Gerald Clyde Lyman, Francisco Machado Jr., John Edward Maloney Jr., Edward Emil Manns, Donald Edward Martin, Asa Martin Jr., Thomas Michael Martinez, Larry Leonard Maxim, Edward Charles McCarthy, Frank Stan McCutcheon III, Hugh R. McKibben Jr., Clarence Lee McKinnon, Alfred Lee McNabb, Alan Twiggs Merritt IV, Anthony John Metzger Jr., Raymond John Michalowski, Richard Herschel Miller, Dennis J. Miller, Larry Laverne Mitchell, Louis Guillermo Mora, James John Morrison, Giro Domenico Muntz, John Earl Myers, Larry Wayne Neal, Wayne Paul Newcomb, Danny Ray Northcutt, Dennis Michael O'Neill, Robert James Oates, Carl Andrew Olson, Gilberto Ortega, Charles Thomas Parker, Kenneth James Patton, James Carl Payne, Paul Renato Peluso Jr., Donald Dean Perkins Jr., Charles Wassel Permeloff, Richard Griffith Philbin, Roy Lee Phillips, Gary Stewart Poscover, Wilmer Potts, Hubert Price Jr., Joe Harold Pringle, Joseph David Puggy, Glenn William Ramey, Alan Ryan Ramsey, Stephen Leon Rainey, Delbert Leon Reese, Robert Antonio Reyes, Robert Ivan Rice, Floyd Richardson Jr., Raymond Nido Rivera, James Marcus Robinson, Joseph Michael Rodriguez, Joseph Romero, Thomas Michael Ross, Paul Charles Rudy, Felix Alvarado Ruiz, Marion Gilmer Runyon, Homer Alfred Ruppel Jr.,
Theodore Marshall Rush, Bernard Stephen Ryan, Ronald Sabin, Selmer Ernest Salveson, Wayne Leroy Sapp, Roger Lloyd Schneider, Dennis Wayne Schonberg, Dale Wayne Schweffel, Gaylord James Siebens, Ronald John Selig, John Joseph Senior, Robert Lee Schaefer, Michael Ira Shaner, Johnny N. Shears Jr., Kenneth Hyde Shellman, Donald Bruce Small, Hurley Alvin Smith, Larry Eldon Smith, Andrew Gene Smith, Stephen Lee Smith, Larry Earl Smith, Leonard Dale Smith, Jr., Thomas Trammell Staples II, Paul Allen Stender, James Barty Stewart, George Curtis Stewart, James Wesley Stewart, Charles H. Stone, Michael Dean Stotler, John Charles Strausser, Donnie J. Swatzel, Richard Allen Swedeen, Robert Elwood Taylor, Jack Clinton Taylor, Brian Lee Thornton, Daniel Ark Tressler, Jr., William Randall Truitt, Leroy Edward Valdez, James Douglas Van Hook, Philip R. Volhart, Richard Lewis Wendell, Carl Lynn West, Timothy Lee White, James Broadus White, Kenneth Jerry Williams, Ray Milton Williams, Billy Wayne Wilson, Michael Wilson, Jack Pyatt Wilson, Jr., Edmund Q. Wilson, Jr., Henry Bertram Wright, Emmett Lee York, Jr., Alan Harry Zimmerman,